Hi, I'm Sarah, and today I'm going to be going over question number 4 from the 2005 AP Calculus AB free response questions. So part A is asking for the x values at which f has a relative extremum. So that is going to be when f prime of x is equal to 0 or does not exist, and it changes signs. So that's something to keep in mind, and now we're going to go look in the f prime of x column of the chart, and we can see that here f prime of x is equal to 0, but it does not change signs. It stays from positive to positive, so that is not a relative extremum. From here at x equals 2, it does not exist, and it goes from positive to negative. So we know that there is a relative extremum there, and it is a maximum because it changes from positive to negative. So for our answer, we would write that there is a relative max at x equals 2 because f prime of x changes signs from positive to negative. And that would be our answer. Now for part B, it's asking us to graph the function based off the information that we are given. So first I'm going to start with f of x, and we're going to graph the points that we are given here. So we have 0, -1, 1, 0, 2, 2, and 3, 0. Now that we've graphed those, we are going to look at f prime and f double prime. So from f double prime, we can see that if it's negative, it's going to be concave down. Positive will be concave up. Concave down, concave up. And for f single prime, we know that between 0 and 1, the slope will be positive. Between 1 and 2, it will also be positive. And then here it will be negative. Now, a helpful picture to reference when you are graphing something like this is this. So we will have, these two are concave down, and these two are concave up, and then the slope here will be positive, slope here will be negative, slope here will be negative, and the slope here will be positive. So this is a little helpful key to reference whenever you're graphing something like that. So between 0 and 1, we have concave down, positive slope. So that's something like that. So we'll just draw a curve in that direction. From 1 to 2, we have positive slope and concave up. So it'll look something like this. Now at x equals 2, we have to be careful because we already stated earlier that there is a relative maximum there, but it does not exist. The slope does not exist. So that means it is a corner. So we need to make sure it's a sharp turn there. And then from 2 to 3, it has concave down and a negative slope. So it'll look something like this. So we make sure we have the sharp turn that we mentioned earlier and have it go down. And be careful not to make it too steep here because you don't want to have a slope that does not exist. And then from 3 to 4, we have concave up, negative, which is like that. And you just kind of continue the line. And then you put a hole at x equals 4 because it does not exist there. It's not defined. Now for part C, it is given that the function g of x is equal to the integral from 1 to x of f of t dt on the open interval 0 to 4. And for all 0 to 4, they want us to find the relative extremum, state whether it's a max or a min, and justify our answer. So from looking at this, we can tell that g prime of x will be equal to f of x. So that's a very important thing to realize. And from there, we can tell that whenever f of x is equal to 0 or does not exist and changes signs, like we stated up here, for f prime of x, that's where we'll have a relative extremum. So we'll go up here to f of x, and we will find that it is equal to 0 at 1 and at 3. And both of these are relative extremum because at x equals 1, it goes from negative to positive, and at x equals 3, it goes from positive to negative. So here we will state that there is a relative min at x equals 1 because f of x or g prime of x changes signs and changes from negative to positive, and there's a relative max at x equals 3 because f prime of x, or f of x, or g prime of x changes from positive to negative. Now for part D, it's pretty similar to part C. It's asking for all the values from 0 to 4 that graph G has points of inflection. So we know points of inflection are where the second derivative of a function is equal to 0 or does not exist, and it changes signs. And it does not matter if it changes from positive to negative or negative to positive. So here we're going to be looking at G double prime of x. And by looking at this above, we know that G double prime of x will be equal to f prime of x. So for this one, we're going to be looking again at f prime of x. And we know from part A that f prime of x changes signs at x equals 2, and it changes from positive to negative. That doesn't matter in this case because we're looking at points of inflection. So we can say that there is a point of inflection at x equals 2 because g double prime of x or f prime of x changes signs. Some important things to keep in mind while you're taking an AP test or practicing for an AP test are language. That's one big thing. Like, I would avoid using language such as like POI for points of inflection, just in case the grader doesn't want to count that as points of inflection because you didn't define it as POI equals points of inflection. I do it when I'm practicing, which is not a good habit. So for the grading breakdown of this question, we would have 2 points in part A, 2 points in part B, 3 points in part C, and 2 points in part D. So in part A, you'd have 1 point for stating that there is a relative extremum at x equals 2, and then another point for stating that it is a relative max and the correct justification. In part B, you would be given 1 point for correct points at 0, 1, 2, and 3, so the points that we plotted from the f of x, and then another point for appropriate increasing, decreasing, and concavity behavior. So that would be making sure that this is the right direction and the right concavity, all that, and including like the corner and stuff like that. In part C, you would be given 1 point for some kind of understanding that g prime of x is equal to f of x, which we stated right here. Another point for the critical points, which would be at x equals 1 and x equals 3, and the correct justification for each one being a min or max. Also in part C, you need to mention that these are critical points and state that at x equals 1 and x equals 3, f prime of x is equal to 0. Which is something I'm not sure if I actually mentioned. So that would possibly be a point off for me, even though I stated that they change signs at those points. So that would probably be a point off here, actually. So that's something to keep in mind, that you are stating why. Because even though we mentioned it up above here, the grader might not count that as work for part C. For part D, there would be 2 points. 1 for stating that it is at x equals 2, and the answer with the correct justification. So that would probably be something along the lines of saying that g prime double prime is equal to f prime, saying that it's because it changes signs, something along the lines of that. And that is the entire 2005 number 4 free response question for the Calc AB test.